Hi friends and welcome back. I am really so happy that you are here with me, that you are going to be watching me create some art in this grid journal of mine that I have started. So these pages that I'm working on are about 8.5 by 11, I think. And so they make a really nice size to be able to do several different squares on one page. I'm starting out here just with a paint marker, and getting some design down in the background. So usually when I think about adding paint markers, it's one of the last steps that I add, but I've been trying to think about switching up the order even that I do things. So it's usually a pretty bold look when you add them onto the end, which I love, but I also want to see what it's like to do it underneath and just seeing some of that pop through the other layers. So it's kind of a fun experiment to change how we normally do things and keep playing until we discover new methods. So next I'm coming in with one of my digital downloads that I printed out. If you're interested in my digital downloads, check out my shop. I have several different options and different colorways, and you can print these out at home and use them as many times as you would like. If you don't have a quality printer at home, I also have an option that I can print the papers and send them to you. So make sure to select the correct option when you go to purchase. So for the rest of the month of April, all digital downloads, stickers, and stationery are 28% off. The code is birthday28, and that's valid for April of this year. So I'll put the code and everything in the description below, as well as any other supplies that I use. I try to link those down below as well. So in my last grid journal video that I posted, I had a few people ask if I had how I actually draw my grids on the page, and I've talked about how I kind of make a stencil for the grid. Instead of drawing around, say, like a sticky note around the outside, for some reason I have better luck when I trace on the inside, like a stencil. So I did create a free little template if you want to use that. And you can download it. I'll put that link down below. Again, that's free to use. And if it helps you make your grids, great. If you have no trouble with that, don't worry about that template. You can just trace any rectangular object that you have, or it doesn't even have to be rectangular. I've seen some people do circle grids, and I have not done any of those yet, but I think that they would be very fun as well. I'm being consistent by putting the same types of elements in my boxes here, but I'm not making it the same in every box. So I'm tearing off random little pieces of this paper and seeing where it fits best, kind of auditioning different placements and going from there. So I don't want to take too much time to think about where the placement goes. This can be an easy thing to overthink, but rather I'm trying to let my instincts take over a little bit, place it randomly throughout the page. And if you don't have any artist papers like this, feel free to look around what you already have at your house. So I like to use like security envelopes that come in the mail. They have usually a fun design on the inside. You can use magazines for collage and book text. All these different things can make really fun collage papers. You just have to start looking at things in a little bit of a different way. So we think about things in their maybe intended use and not always on how something could be used. So I encourage you to think about things a little bit differently and see what kind of sparks that inspiration for you. I'm adding in some scribbles. I love the way that this feels like it loosens up the page, but more importantly, it loosens up my mind a little bit. Sometimes I start to feel almost like a tightening in my shoulders and how I'm even holding myself when I'm working. If I feel like I'm overthinking too much, I can feel it in my body. And so this scribbling, holding the pencil at the very end with a very loose grip, helps me to kind of loosen this up. And it allows my mind maybe the permission to just play in a way and not feel like it is too precious or that things need to be perfect. I'm noticing that some of those papers at the edges, I didn't glue them very well. I was just hasty with my gluing, and so I was readjusting some of those corners. I'm adding in some masking tape now, and this serves a little bit of a dual purpose. I'm placing it over some of those trouble spots on the paper, but it also adds a really fun design element as well. I like to think of tapes, washi tapes, different colored tapes, even masking tape like this, as another collage element. So you can, if it helps you to think about it as paper that already has the adhesive backing, you can think about it like that. I'm adding in some stencil here, and royal blue that I'm using here is not typically a color that I use a lot in my artwork, but I have to say that I've been drawn to kind of new and different colors over the past year, using colors that maybe I wouldn't use before. I still love all of my usual go-tos and favorites, but it's been fun to explore some of those other colors that I just don't reach for on a regular basis. So even though this is not a color I use all the time, I feel like I can bring it back to myself by adding in some of those bold black and white elements that you normally see that I showcase in my work. So this bold black may not be the first thing I would have thought of to grab with going with this blue. I would have thought adding more whites and things like that in. So since the background of the page and of each square already is predominantly white, I thought it would be good to add in some of those bold black marks on top. My favorite way to use stencils is to not use a stencil in its entirety. You don't need to be too precise about it in any way. As you can see, I just took like little sections of the stencil, and it gives it a much more random approach, and this can be a really great way, especially if you're working like in backgrounds and things like that, to get a fun design down in a quick way. I added in some white art marks with that China marker. It wasn't as bold as I was hoping, and so I'm coming now with some, some white gesso and adding in some over some of the areas. I really like to use white gesso with collage, so in addition to collage, because it helps to kind of blur and blend the edges of the edge of the collage piece, the piece of paper, and the background. So it helps things to kind of flow and almost make you question what's on top and what's underneath. I don't like things to look like they've just been placed on top. Rather, I want everything to integrate and flow together. Now, that's just my style of artwork. I am a pretty messy when I create. I like things to be a little bit more grungy. But just try out different things and see what works for you and what feels right that it's your style. So you may be one that doesn't like ripped edges and you want to use either scissors or a paper cutter whenever you need paper down to a smaller size. Or you may be like me where you want to rip it randomly and see what kind of pieces that you get. There is no right or wrong in art, and I think that is one of the most beautiful things, because no matter what you're doing, you're not doing it wrong. You may not end up liking the end result, but that doesn't mean you did it wrong. I think everything is just a learning opportunity to go forward. I want to bring in some of that bold blue and make it into the foreground a little bit more. I think it was a fun experiment to do the marker as the first step, because you can see it kind of popping through those layers a little bit, but I want to make it even a bigger statement on my page. So this is a solid marker. It's a solidified paint on the inside. It's different than a Posca marker or a Crink marker because those are a liquid acrylic on the inside. This is a solidified paint and it's permanent once it's dry. So I can even add water or different stuff on top of it after it's dry and it should not go anywhere. I like the idea of keeping this pretty light and airy overall to be in contrast with that royal sharp blue. I already have quite a bit of white on the page, whether that be from the gesso that I added before or from just the paper, the background in general. So instead of coming in with white, I'm coming in with this really soft, nice, neutral gray. It's one of my favorite paints right now. It seems to blend really well with other colors and can be just a nice base almost. So N5 neutral gray is the color, I believe. That's from Golden and it's a heavy body. And I'm working with a dry paintbrush and just kind of dry brushing that onto the spots that I want it to be. And almost rubbing that paint in, if that makes sense. So it's not just kind of a light brush over the top. You can see I'm really kind of working that into the page. Adding it in places where maybe I had collaged before to kind of blend those edges and play with your eye a little bit of what's in the foreground and what's in the background of your page. Overall, this grid journal spread ends up a little bit more plain, basic. That doesn't feel like the right word. Maybe there's just not as many elements going on, but I think that's a really great example that your work doesn't always have to be the same. We can listen to kind of what the page wants, the elements that we start with, and if we change even how we start or the order of the steps that we do things, we can get a end product that looks different, but it still can be uniquely your style. So if you're kind of having a little bit of trouble defining maybe what your artistic voice is, think about the steps that you normally do and try to just switch up the order a little bit. I think in the end your style will come through and it will be obvious, like, oh, Brooke made that. Like I can tell, like even scrolling on Instagram and I see different people's work, I can a lot of times pinpoint when somebody made something. So try just switching up your process and your order and see if that's something that even sparks more creativity in you. I liked the black that we added before. I feel like it was a little bit unexpected for this page, and so I'm coming back in and adding a little bit more. So I'm doing it with a different tool. So as you can see, it's a Posca marker and it leaves a little bit more of a shiny appearance versus the black stenciling that I did before was an opaque matte look on the end. So this is a fun thing to do if you're bringing in the same color again. If you feel like it needed more black, try to think about mixing up your supplies a little bit. This changes up the texture and the visual aspect overall of your piece. I'm adding in more white art marks now, just giving it some finishing touches and using my correction pen, and this leaves a really great kind of bumpy texture when it's done and it dries really fast. As always, I try to link all the supplies that I use in the description below. Make sure to let me know if I missed anything, and I will find out where that is from. Also, while you're at it, make sure that you're subscribed to my page so that you can be notified of new videos, and hit that like button. Also, leave me a comment below. What do you want to be seeing from me? What kind of videos do you like? Do you enjoy it when I talk through my thought process? Are there any techniques that you've seen me use that you want me to explain further? Let me know what your thoughts are. I'm still finishing with those final touches, adding in some black art marks, and it's a little bit hard to see on camera, so you can see that I'm doing kind of pinstripes lines there, and I'm kind of keeping it in where I added that really light neutral gray before, using it as a little bit of a guide where I'm adding those black stripes. So that's kind of a fun way to given in a irregular shape of lines instead of doing them all equal. I'm changing them up a little bit in where they place in the background. So that's kind of fun to use that as a little guide. I decided after I was done that the outside boxes needed to be a little bit bolder. And so sometimes at the beginning, I'll just draw the box once, and then at the end, I'll go around and trace it again. I'm okay with it being messy, that those boxes are not perfect. In fact, I think it just adds to the overall character. So I hope that you guys really enjoyed today's spread as much as I did. I feel like it has a little bit different look than the last ones that I've posted, and it's fun to experiment and try things that are new. So have a good one, and I will see you next time.